Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Webinar Talk Show. I'm Eliz Green.
And I am Tom Singer. And last week, Eliz and I had the honor to be the Masters of Ceremonies for an online conference for an organization called SPIN, which is an organization made up of very experienced meeting planners. And my gosh, we had a lot of fun working with that group last week.
Oh,
we totally did. It was such a great, it was so well planned. And, Shana Suko and both of us, we worked together. And that's one of the things we love to do when we're emceeing a conference is really to work ahead of time and talk about the flow of the event and who would be the right speakers for the event. And Shauna had said that she wanted this event to feel like a 2-day long hug because honestly, that's what people in the meetings industry need right now, a 2-day long hug. And
yeah, I think both restaurant people and meeting planners, if you know anybody in that industry, just if they work in the meetings business or hospitality, they need a hug at the end of 2020.
Yes, indeed. So there were lots of things that were planned throughout the conference that I really thought worked very well. The first one I want to talk about is the leveraging of the members of the association, of really finding out what their individual expertises were and how could they bring them to be part of this virtual conference. Because all things are possible in this virtual world. We had speakers from Mexico and speakers from St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands and all over the country. So it's very possible to do anything. But we had members of that association who showed mixology talents, how to put together some cocktails.
That was kind of a fun way to do sort of the evening event was, they had sent out a shopping list in advance. And then one of the members who knows how to make specialty drinks just showed everybody for about 45 minutes how to make 2 or 3 different drinks. And it was a lot of fun.
It was. And during the day, so there were evening events that were done on Zoom. And during the day, the virtual conference was webinar style in the Zen event in Avaya platform, which was really an interesting platform to work into, and we had a good time. But some of the other members, we had a morning smoothie that I set up a kitchen set and did with the guest who did that, and we did potpourri, making that. We had members who did a panel on keeping your productivity even in this crazy time. So that leveraging of members, I think, was one of the things that made it a special event. Anything you thought it was special, Tom?
Well, and I think one of the other things that was really cool was they had, like we always talk about, different formats, not just talking heads over PowerPoint, but they had some more traditional style speeches. They had people who did a speech, and then you and I came in and did Q&A with them, both stuff that we had and curating stuff that was going on in the chat. We also had 2 that were just full interviews. I interviewed a gentleman who's a professor at the War College, and we had so much fun just talking about sort of, his topic and really diving into things. But it really was like sitting by the fire and having a glass of wine with a good friend. And I think people like having those different formats throughout the 2 days, because then it's not just, here we go again with another speaker.
Exactly. And both days went very, very quickly. The other thing, and in full disclosure, we don't typically have overly emotional reactions. Like, we tend to be pretty professional. We're on the sort of, happy side. That's our job. We're the talk show hosts. But at the end of both days, there were guests. On the first day, it was a panel of, they called it SPED talks. So they were short little stories about something that...
7-minute little stories of their life, but it was all about how are you keeping happiness and sanity. And it was real personal. One person talked about how she gave up drinking.
Yeah.
Another person, talked about how she quit a toxic job with coworkers and a boss who were just jerks. And she just decided, you know what? Life's too short. I'm going on without this company.
Right.
And then
Another
the
one
final
moved to
one,
Mexico.
yep, another one who relocated with her husband to start their life over in the middle of a pandemic. And then
Right.
the final one that was just so touching was a woman, her and her husband, they had dealt with fertility issues, and they adopted slightly older, still young, but slightly older children. And it was her journey to finding her two
Oh.
sons and how they've raised them. And when she finished, I mean, how often do you see me come back speechless?
Never. It was a beautiful story. We both had tears in our eyes, and it really was that embodiment of that hug, because it was such a story of love and hope and giving. Oh, and then we had Alison Masari for the closing keynote of the Hope conference, and I knew it was going to be amazing, and it was, and we both came back like, geez Louise.
Well, yeah, she has, I've always thought for the last couple of years, she's one of the most dynamic speakers, both with her personal story and the struggles she went through after being in a horrible accident, but then also the way she's fought back, and then just how open her heart is to humanity, for lack of a better term. Every time I've ever seen her or talked to anyone who's seen her speak, she's so moving. But in this virtual environment, she knocked it out of the park.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I think people, when you're planning a virtual event, people fear that it's not going to be as impactful, that you're not going to have that sort of wow moment. But I think because we're so close here, because we're basically looking into the eyes of that presenter, it almost has a deeper impact than seeing them, maybe 100 feet away in a ballroom. It was an amazing event. And we learned some things. Every time we MC something, we learn some things.
We learned something new that we can always bring to our next clients.
Yes. One of my big takeaways is drag queen bingo in the virtual environment is so much fun. Oh my goodness. Was
the history of this organization is they always have like a bingo night, like pajama bingo, where people just show up in the ballroom, at 8:30 at night, and they have drinks and candy and cake, and then they play bingo and just have fun. Well, they didn't want to lose that in the virtual environment. So to call bingo, instead of having just anyone call bingo, they hired a Broadway actor who is also a well-known drag queen. And I don't think I've seen anything that was more fun in a virtual environment, maybe ever, since this whole thing started.
Yeah, I'll admit, I had my doubts about how that was going to work. But I think, again, because you're so close, and somebody else said, bigger than life works really well in this environment because you're so close and it's so engaging. That was so much fun.
One of the things that I learned, and we sort of already knew this, but we had to put it into practice. One of the things I learned is that you always have to have a plan B. And as masters of ceremonies, Eliz and I actually talk to the speakers in advance, like, what if you lose internet at your house? And oftentimes their face gets in this thing of horror, like, oh no, that can't ever happen. Well, it can happen. And if we don't talk about it, we're not going to be prepared for what to do. And so Eliz and I always have, when we're hosting an event, 2 or 3 possible plan Bs that we're able to jump in with if it happens. And it actually happened at this one. One of the speakers, she was leading a 20-minute yoga session on the first day, couldn't get in because of just technical issues.
Right.
And we didn't miss a beat. And I think that that's something that people need to always be thinking of is, do we have 2 or 3 things planned so that it's seamless to the audience?
Well, and because we both sit in our own expertise, we can provide real value during that time. So rather than just like, hey, Tom, let's talk about the weather. No, we have things that we can give to that audience that are valuable. So what we did was I asked Tom a question about how do you continue nurturing those client relationships, because as meeting professionals, it's relationship selling. You have to maintain those relationships. I asked him a question about that because I know he has 5 tips about that. Turns out the camera worked for our yoga instructor, and she was able to come back in, which means we shifted quick. But we never go back on a promise of
That's right.
giving
So
tips.
the second day, we actually worked in some time to be able to share those 5 tips, because we took about 5 minutes setting it up, and we talked about sort of my idea that, in the midst of the pandemic, every day you should be reaching out and talking to at least one really smart person.
Right.
And then Eliz was like, Tom, you have 5 tips on how to stay connected. And that's when the yoga person appeared. And it was really, it's not about Eliz and I, it's about the audience, and yoga was
Right.
on the agenda. And so we had told people, we don't, there's some technical difficulties. Here's what we're doing. So as soon as she was ready, we shifted back to the agenda. And then the next day we worked in some time, about 5 minutes, to share those tips. And
Right.
I actually think it worked out really well for the audience.
I do. And I'm pretty sure anybody who's listening this is wondering, hey, Tom, what are those 5 tips? So let's do that, because we can roll. Tom, what 5 tips do you have to stay connected right now?
Well, and I think this is really important for people, be it in the meetings industry or any industry. As Eliz said, we're in relationship businesses. Almost every business out there, all opportunities in our lives come from people. And early on, when this whole pandemic hit, I realized, and now much has been written about it, that a lot of people just sat back and waited, since they couldn't go to their traditional networking events. They couldn't attend the industry conferences. And there was so much struggle to get the kids home for school and figuring out how to make technology for work, that those human connections, for many people, not for everybody, sort of stopped. And the problem is that our social skills, studies have shown that our social skills are much like our muscles. If you don't work them out, they're going to atrophy. And so I have some tips that I've been sharing with my clients. I've been doing webinars for law firms and accounting firms and other professional services people to make sure that the people on their team aren't letting relationships die. And these 5 tips, they're somewhat simple, but ask yourself, am I doing them, and am I doing them consistently? So I'll share them with you right now. And number 1 is you have to be proactive, which means you have to be the person who does the reaching out. If you just assume that your relationships are going to continue because everyone's in the same pandemic boat, everyone's at home, so I'll just wait it out, you might find yourself on the other side of who's closer with that client. Because what I tell everybody is, remember that your competitor's prospect is your client, which means if your competition is doing a better job of cultivating relationships, of keeping in touch, of making people feel appreciated, and if this pandemic goes on for another 6 months, I mean, that's the minimum that's been predicted. Another year is still pretty realistic. That'll mean we could have gone 20 months without sort of the normal human interaction. If you're not being proactive, those relationships could fall by the wayside, and you don't want to have that happen. So number 1 is you got to be proactive. You have to be the person who's reaching out. So my recommendation is every day, reach out to 2 or 3 people. So the second tip is that you have to be useful. You have to be helpful, offer to help people, find some way to provide value, because you can't always just be reaching out going, hey, Eliz, how are you today? I'm just touching base, because there's no real value there. Now, you can do that the first time. If you haven't talked to somebody since the pandemic began, the first call can be, oh my gosh, how are you? It's been so long. I just want to touch base. But then what do you do 6 or 8 weeks later when it's time to sort of have at least a little bit of a human interaction? You have to find ways to really provide value to people. And there's lots of ways you can do that. One way is, who can you connect them with? Are they feeling disconnected? Are they feeling lonely? What can you do to help their network grow? And sometimes it's just offering to help. I offer to help people all the time, and few people ever reach out and ask for the help. Now, be sincere if you're going to make the offer, because they might. But just having the knowledge that someone has their back, sometimes that's all the value that people need in this weird kind of situation that we're all in. And number 3, be tech savvy. Use the technology tools that exist. Now, for those of you who know me, I've been teaching people's networking skills and how to connect with people in this gadget crazy world for a long time. And I'm always telling people the phone is not the answer. The answer is human connection. However, in the midst of a global pandemic, guess what? Use your phone. We have these great tools. We have technology that we didn't have 20 years ago. Imagine for a second that this pandemic happened in 1997. We barely were using email in 1997. We didn't have streaming capabilities. There were no smartphones. We would not have been able to keep in touch with people if everybody had suddenly been sent home. It would have been a disaster. The good news is today we have the tech tools. We have, email, we have LinkedIn, we have text, we have video. I've talked to a lot of clients who are doing some really interesting things with video as a way to stay connected to people. So dive into the technology and use it, which leads into the fourth tip, which is be creative. Because if you're doing the exact same thing that everyone else is doing, you're just going to get deleted. You're going to fall into the sea of sameness. I've noticed that I'm getting about 100% more inbound bulk emails now than I did in February, because everyone's like, oh, I have to stay in touch. I'd better send more newsletters. The problem is that every time any of us log into our email, it's newsletter after newsletter after newsletter, and they aren't personal. So I tell people more personal, less broadcast, and find ways to do it in a creative manner. And I have lots of examples I can share with anybody if you want to go deeper on that. And then the final tip is just be transparent, be true, be honest, be authentic, essentially, to what's going on in your world. Because for some people, this pandemic has really only meant work from home. Their paycheck is still coming in. They don't have kids, so they don't have to homeschool. There's really nothing different to the basics of their life. Their food, their shelter, their basic levels are all still taken care of. But other people sometimes can be the tale of two pandemics. Other people have seen their entire industry wiped out, like we talked about in hospitality and restaurants and the meetings business. For some of those people, their entire income has been stripped away from them and they might be having a hard time. If that's you, it's okay to let people know that you're having a little bit of a struggle this year. Other people want to help. And yet so many people are out there trying to fake it till they make it. And I just don't believe in that. I mean, you don't want to be Eeyore, you don't want to be sad all the time. And every time someone says, how are you? You don't want to just lament into all your problems. But if you're having a struggle, let people know, because here's what I've found. Many people want to help. And if they know that you need help, some of them will step up and find a way to do it. So those are my kind of 5 tips that I think are important for people at no matter who they are and what they do during this pandemic, of ways to what I call social tighten while with social distancing.
Well, and I think our work intersects here, because you're really talking about how to make sure that you're staying in contact so that you're developing those relationships, those sales relationships. Clients continue to know who you are. But then at the end, you talked about this transparency part. And I talk about a similar thing about creating a circle of support for yourself, that you're pulling those people in who are the kind of people who can make you laugh when you're having a hard day, or actually can give you good advice when you're struggling, or just are that, soft shoulder. Those people are really important. But if you're sort of invested in that, putting on the suit of success, like I am super successful and I'm not going to let any of you know that this is actually a really difficult time for me, it is very hard for people to support you if they don't know you need that support.
Yep. And that's why I think just honesty, transparency, it's so important. And it was interesting after I shared these on the SPIN conference. One of the people, I had a follow-up call. One of the meeting planners scheduled a call to talk to me about, her events and having you or I host those or speak at those. And one of the things she said is that really resonated with her, that whole part about just be honest, be transparent if you're struggling. And she added something that I'm going to work in, and that is remember too, that sometimes your extroverted friends who seem to have everything together, they might not. So don't assume that just because someone says everything's fine, doesn't mean it necessarily is. So sometimes you might need to peel back that onion a little bit. And I thought that was good advice.
Well, and it brings us to one of the things I thought was really smart about SPIN in the SPIN conference. They have a pledge that everybody takes at the beginning. And one of the things that they pledge is you're not allowed to use the word fine. If somebody asks you how you are, you're not allowed to say, I'm fine.
Fine. I'm fine.
Also, you're not supposed to ask unless you really want to know, but that sort of veneer that we're all invested in want to look like we have it together in front of our professional colleagues, of course, but we know that from our association as well. When you take that step back, when you allow yourself to be vulnerable and open yourself to that support, to that even critique, that's when growth happens. If you're you're sort of sitting in the I'm okay, I'm successful, I'm fine, or even I'm comfortable, that's not when growth happens. Not at all.
Well, I think another lesson from Spin was they already had a very much of a community, sort of a family feel amongst their members. But really, almost all associations that I work with at least have some level of that.
Yes.
And a lot of them really cling to the fact that, oh, we're like a family. Well, I think if you remember that when you're planning these virtual or hybrid events, if you remember that sort of soft underbelly of reality that happens within families, that there are some raw issues and there are some people who struggle. When you push that forward into these virtual events, it resonates through the camera. There were people in the evening call, and I won't share the details because it was sort of under a cone of privacy, who shared some real personal stuff. And at the chat room, people were like, I will call you Monday. Let's set up a weekly call. How can I help you? And I just realized that all of our organizations, companies and associations who plan events, this is why we have events. We have events for human connection. We can watch videos, we can watch webinars all day long. If there's no human-to-human interaction, then we lose. And so we have to be working on that on these virtual and hybrid events.
Absolutely true. And I think that is going back to where we started. Consulting with your MCs early on in the process so that you get the benefit of our experience. I mean, hopefully you work with us, but as MCs, we get to see behind the scenes of lots of different events. So we can give you all kinds of ideas of what's worked. We can dig deep. I mean, one of the things that I was asked to do is come up with a sort of program of weird holidays from around the world. That was a lot of fun. So don't be afraid to ask. We participated in the dance party that opened and closed every day. Yeah, look, don't be afraid to ask for people to really dig in as MCs and be part of your event in ways that maybe you wouldn't anticipate.
So I have counseled my meeting planner friends as long as I've been working as a professional speaker and a master of ceremonies. Not just me, not just you, but every professional speaker that you've ever worked with, you should look at them as a resource in the future. So if you're looking to vet speakers, call the speakers who knocked it out of the park. Now, not all of them are going to be friendly and take your call, but I believe most of them will. If you had someone who you thought, wow, she was the best keynote we've had in the last 5 years, if you called her and said, we're looking for someone who is just as good as you, everybody thinks, well, but if I don't want to hire her, I can't call her. Yes, because she has friends. She has friends in this business, and no speaker will refer somebody who sucks.
Because we don't want to look bad.
Well, we don't want to look bad, and we're hypercritical. We know what's good on the stage. So we're paying attention. And those of us who get to host events, we get to see a lot of speakers. So I tell people I always tell all my clients, for the rest of your life, you can call me and ask for ideas and I'll help you vet speakers.
Absolutely true. And because we do see behind the scenes, we know who's a joy to work with as well, who's flexible, who's willing to say, oh, you want to do it in a format that's different? Cool. Oh, we're running late. You want me to trim off 5 minutes? Cool.
And you know what's great? Everyone was that way who was on the speaker docket for Spin.
Yes.
There was nobody who was a pain
divas
at all. No divas.
No divas. It was such a joy. I am honestly kind of sad it's over. I would have done it. It was a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. It was a lot of work. But
it was a lot of fun too.
Definitely. All right. So Tom, you said that tip number 4 was get creative in terms of reaching out. I think I'm going to find that fun dance party video from the end of Spin and maybe send it to some people.
Nice.
That
I
would
will
be
say
fun.
that I am not one who's known to dance, and I'm not one who's ever been accused of having rhythm. But when asked if we would participate in the dance party, I was right there because that's what you got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really about what can you, especially right now, as we're looking towards the end of the year, what could you do to make the people you rely on in your business smile a little bit? So whether it's sending a fun video of you doing something silly, or maybe you know how to make an outstanding holiday cocktail, you could do a little video or just send somebody the recipe. Cheers to the end of 2020. See you later, bye. I think that's such a great tip. And boy, if you're watching this and you're on Facebook, it'd be kind of fun to see, down in the comments. Maybe you had an idea.
What's the most creative way? What's the most creative way you've reached out to somebody? Put that in the comments.
Yeah, that would be great to know. Or on YouTube if you're there. So, Tom, I knew it was going to be fun to hear those tips and to sort of go through our wonderful 3 days with SPINCon. What are you looking forward to in 2021?
I'm looking for 2020 to be in the past and to be one of those memories where we say, God, where were you? What did you do in 2020? So I guess I'm looking forward to the pandemic being over, although that might be a little wishful for at least the first half of the year. Yeah. But the other thing I'm looking forward to is just the opportunity to do more. I'm looking forward to the hybrid events that are coming. Yes. We all talk about the fact that we're virtual for now, but in 2021, it's going to be a lot of hybrid. And it was 6 years ago, you and I realized that hybrid events needed really engaging and different ways of interacting with that at-home audience. So I'm looking forward to working with more clients who do hybrid events.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that too. I'm actually on a committee that is planning the National Speakers Association event for July of 2021. And that we're looking at hybrid because in all likelihood, not everybody's going to want to travel. Hopefully some of us will be able to travel. But,
I'll go.
I know you will.
I'm ready. I'll go. Where is it? When is it? I'll be there.
It's in Las Vegas in July. So,
115 degrees outside, I'll still be there.
Because you're just that sort of guy. You're ready to go.
I usually travel 100 nights a year. I've been gone 2 nights since March 15th.
Yeah. We need to get you back on the road.
My wife likes me, but I think she wants me to leave once in a while.
It's true. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for the webinar talk show today. We are so excited to be wrapping up 2020 and moving into 2021. We have some fun episodes to close out the year. We have Stacey Hunke joining us on Wednesday. She's going to talk about corporate communication training, why you shouldn't abandon your training. We're going to have on Monday, we're going to have Angelique Ruers. She's going to talk about the future of corporate events. And then on Wednesday of next week, we have Kristen Arnold. And oh my goodness, I'm going to forget her name. From CAPS, coming to talk about...
President of CAPS. Yeah, the
President
Canadian
of CAPS.
Association
I apologize
of
for
Speakers.
forgetting your name at the moment. But they're going to tell us how they shifted their event into the virtual world. Still a lot to
and it's happening right now. It's happening this week. So that's going to be super fresh content.
It is indeed fresh content. Where would they find us, Tom, if they wanted to find us?
So they can find us at webinartalkshow.com. And if you want to go to the Facebook page, you can go to webinartalkshow.live and you can find all of the past episodes right there.
And that's where you find us every Monday and Wednesday at 11 o'clock Central Time. We're excited to come back on Wednesday. Until then, have a great day.